Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Stories of Opportunity with Coach Sisodia. I'm glad to host all of you, and I pray and I hope that all of you are safe in this pandemic area. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'm Aditya Sisodia. I'm a professional coach. I support individuals through thought provoking and creative conversation, be it their business or be it any other domain of their life. Story of Opportunity is a curated live Q&A where we invite individual change makers who step up and share their life experiences. The whole theme of Stories of Opportunity is based around that all of us are looking for that opportunity, and that opportunity is all around us. In our today's episode, we have got a very special guest. Our guest for the day is Mr. Puneet Manuja. He's the co-founder and the chief operating officer at YourDOST, a mental health wellness organization. And prior to YourDOST, Puneet comes from consulting background. He has worked with McKinsey, and his clients were basically in the pharmaceutical and IT domain. He has pursued his MBA from IIM Bangalore in the batch of 2012 and 14. After realizing that he has a bigger calling rather than the computer science background, he took the plunge after working in corporate organizations such as Zynga, which is a gaming company, and D.E Shop. So, in our today's journey, Puneet would be talking about that how he manages to take the plunge of entrepreneurship, to take the plunge of moving from one domain to another. And also, I would like to mention that Puneet is a gold medalist in computer science from his NIT Calicut campus, and also is the proud recipient of Forbes 30 Under 30 2017. So without further ado, let's roll the intro and see Puneet on the other side. Hi Puneet, how are you?
Hey, hi Aditya. I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous, and I hope everyone is safe at your end, your family, and also your team members.
Yes, I think so far so good.
Glad to hear that. And Puneet, first of all, I would like to thank you and I appreciate you taking out time because I know what's your schedule to share your life experiences with our community members. And currently, we are live on three platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So, Puneet, we'll have a live interactive session where we have got some questions from our audience, which will talk about your journey. And with your permission, I would like to initiate our conversation.
Sure, Aditya, please. I'll try to see what best I can guide with the limited experience that I have so far.
That's really humbling of you to say. Great. So, Puneet, one of the most common questions that I start our conversation with, why did you choose this topic? Like the topic that you have chosen for our today's conversation is taking the plunge. So please share your thoughts.
Right. So I think, see, one of the reasons to choose this topic, I think there are two main reasons. The first is because this is one of the most asked questions, at least to me, when I let's say, go to a college or let's say to a corporate for presenting or speaking for an event. So that's why I thought let us maybe take that itself as a topic, because maybe a lot more people will relate to it, and I can also give some, I think, maybe credible answers or can do justice to this topic with the experience that I have, the thought process that I had during that time. Second reason, I think that was why the theme was chosen. Now, I think coming to why I wanted to call it taking the plunge, I think if you look at, I think what this phrase means is it's basically a sudden change or sudden call or move that you take and you're very nervous about it, right? And I think this is exactly what goes through the mind when you kind of take a plunge in terms of moving on from a very typical corporate career or whatever, let's say maybe after education, and start a company. Like, so I think that is the reason I wanted to call it taking the plunge, because I think most of us either keep thinking about it or maybe finally take a plunge. There is no planning that gets involved. There has to be a leap of faith because of which you take that sudden, I think, maybe a very gut instinct that helps you take that leap of faith and get you on the other side. So I think that was the reason to choose and name this topic as taking the plunge.
Great, great. So, Puneet, I'm just curious, what triggered this habit of taking the leap of faith? Because coming from an engineering background, you went into management, then you went into consulting, and you worked into some of the gaming industries and others, and now you are into a whole new domain. So, how do you decide that this is where I'm taking the plunge, given the environment which is happening? Because previously we could say, let's be in our comfort zone, but the pandemic has changed the entire definition of comfort zone. So, for the viewers who have joined us live, your 2 cents about what is that helps you to take that leap of faith every time when you are into something. Because one of the things which I really appreciate about you, Puneet, is you do not stay into your comfort zone. Every time you are into your stretch zone, which helps you to grow. So, what helps you to take that plunge?
Right. So, Aditya, I think, see, there's no right answer to it, but maybe I'll take you through, I think, the process or thoughts that go into my mind or went through my mind during, I think, some of the calls that I had taken in my own life. So, see, it's a very individual driven, it's a factor of risk taking ability that you have. Or when I say risk taking ability, see, certain events in your life shape you towards that risk taking or towards, I would say, taking certain calls, right? So, if you look at for me, the first time I ever took such a call or when I was faced with such a choice was when I was, I think, getting into my undergrad. So I am from Kanpur, and I think I could not clear IIT even after taking a drop. And I think that was the time I wanted to at least clear IIT, but I could not. And then AIEEE used to happen at that point in time, where NITs were the colleges that you get into based on your ranks. So that time, based on my rank, when I went for, let's say, the admissions process, I had two options. Like, I had an option to take a college which was in Uttar Pradesh itself, a very, very renowned NIT that was there. And the other option that I had, which I think both of them were roughly at a very similar rank in terms of the institutes. And this other college was NIT Calicut, where I actually went to. And that point in time, if you look at, I think even when I asked my family as well, they all wanted it to be probably in UP itself, because it would be closer to home, probably. There'll be a little more of the comfort which would be there, or it will be a little known. And going to Kerala was something which I pushed towards. And the reason I pushed was very silly. So I think that's why I'm trying to tell you this answer is, see, there might be very silly reasons for which you take certain calls. And I always tell people, right, it's okay if you're confused. Like, see, all these stories that I'm telling you is all created in hindsight, right? These stories, see, when you live life, it is forwards. When you tell a guidance, or let's say give a guidance or give an advice, it's always backwards. So it's much more easier to put those pieces together, which will happen in everyone's life. So for me, why I took that choice, for example, was for the silly reason of, see, if I stay probably closer to the home, one, maybe I'll not become very independent. I'll always have like a safety net in terms of maybe going back home for whatever things I'm stuck in. And second important reason was in terms of language as well. Like, I wanted to come, like, NIT Calicut is in Kerala, so I wanted to come to a place where I will be forced to speak in English. And I think that most of us, I think, and this is a very personal call, right? I was in the northern part of India and I wanted to improve my communication skills, right? I always used to otherwise think in Hindi, translate it into English, and then speak. And I wanted to get rid of that process, and that can't happen unless you are very regular at conversing in that language, right? So that was the second reason for choosing that topic. So like this is like the first event where I was hit with a choice, and I took that plunge per se, and then it worked out well. And I think similar to that, there have been things, and I would say choices I've had. Like when I got into DE Shaw, I would say after that I had an option to go to either Zynga or an option to go to Morgan Stanley, and I chose Zynga, which was a very very small company at that point in time. It had hardly 20 folks when I joined, whereas Morgan Stanley was a brand. And I took that call because like there were certain life incidents and events that happened which had made me a little more comfortable. So see, if I tell you it's not one life event that kind of shapes you into taking those risks or taking the plunge, each and every life incident or events in your life, factors that are important in your life actually mold you in a certain way to take those calls. And that is what I think has happened with me also over time. And I have tried to experiment as much as, and slowly it has shaped me into a person who I am today, where I can probably take a lot more risks than what I used to take 2 years ago and 5 years ago and maybe 10 years ago. So I think that's how I think the journey has been so far.
Great, great. So we have a comment from Shavik. He's saying Shavik is a post graduate student, and he's saying majority of the individuals struggle with communication. Putting yourself in uncomfortable situation leaves you with no choice other than facing your fears. Because when you are saying, I can realize, because Puneet, you and I interact with a lot of college undergrads and a postgraduate, and
Correct.
these are like reality where people are saying, I cannot speak, I have to think in English, I cannot present public speaking and other things. These are very important, crucial things. And Shavik has asked us another question via YouTube, and this is a very relevant. And the question is that how difficult was it for you to execute your idea in a country where mental health has been neglected for such a long time, and even still now we are in a progressive stage. There is a huge scope. So, what were the initial challenges when you told people I'm going to enter into mental health? Because we do not know the difference between psychologist and psychiatrist till date. So,
Right.
your 2 cents.
So I think, see, a reason to, I think, see, there are two parts to this question. One was, I would say, starting up, and second was starting up in a sector which has been kind of not a very mainstream sector, which I think we did not have a lot of surety on how it will go, and it was all discovery that happened for us, right? So, see, the answer to the first part is, I still remember a conversation with my dad, and so me and Richa, who are the two co-founders, and we are married as well. So I think that adds to a little bit more complexity because see, when she quit, I think there was a certain folks who are important in our lives who you have to also onboard in terms of the decisions that you take. And then when I also quit my job and got with her into starting, that was like another bomb on the family saying, both of you are leaving, what will you do? Right? And for me, when I had quit, I did not even clear my education loan at that point in time. So for me, I think that was kind of a leap of faith in terms of starting, and it was not very much looking at it just as a business that how big is the market. I think a lot of those are important, definitely look at the feasibility, but for us that drive was something which was sparked long time back. So if I tell you the journey of why we started this company, so Rich and me has been like we have been working together from 2009, right? In 2010 itself, we had pitched this exact idea of YourDOST and the exact name called YourDOST with one of the social venture competitions at ISB, Indian School of Business, which is in Hyderabad. It organized, the competition is called IDEA. So we had pitched it even in 2010. Probably at that point in time, we were a little naive or not polished enough to create it as a structured venture. But that is a time when we had actually pitched almost very similar concept of virtual therapy, virtual reality being used, online modes being used, technology being used basically. Though we did not win it, but with that, I think the initiation that happened, and the reason for that was an incident that happened in Richa's college, a girl who had taken her life. That was what prompted us to discuss that. And then when I met her, I also connected to it because I had faced a lot of challenge in my college. Like I think Aditya mentioned, I was a gold medalist in computer science, and for me, even after being a gold medalist during campus placements, almost for a month, I did not get qualified for any job offer. When I say I could not get any job, it was not like companies were not coming, right? Almost 25% of the batch was placed. And somehow in computer science, being a gold medalist, failing interview after each, and I have all the 9 companies that I failed during that 1 month. I still have a small notebook that I maintained at that point in time, writing the comments that each of them gave. And that to me was a period which I don't know, I could never share it with anyone because I think that's how we perceive when we are in that moment, right? I thought my parents, I'm a very, I think, from very typical middle class family. My dad was in a bank, mom was a homemaker. So I was not even sure, like, what will happen, like, what will I ask them? Like, I don't think they can help me. So I kept it to myself. And somehow, after every failure that was happening with the interviews, I was not able to clear the job offer, I was not able to get. Somehow I started thinking maybe my friends also might be laughing behind me. Like, okay, this guy maybe was like how we use a term called Maggu or like a bookworm. Maybe he got marks and he was a gold medalist because of that, but not smart enough to clear interviews, right? So that was not even helping me in my confidence. So I think that as a period to me connected with this concept when Richa mentioned about what was happening or what had happened during her undergrad days as well. And that is when I would say within a few months that we discussed this, we thought we should do something about it. And that's how it shaped. I would say in 2010, though we did not qualify for that, we still went ahead and opened a blog. We wanted to do a lot of research because, like Aditya said, right, even we were in the same shoes. We did not know at that point in time what is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. We did not know a lot of other things. What do even psychologists do, right? Why do people go or not go to them? So we started doing a lot of that. We started a blog with the name YourDOST itself. So if you look at in our current blog, you will find articles in that blog which are as old as 2010, 2011. And that's how the journey started, right? So it was not about let's create something and then quit because it probably is a big venture or will become a big venture, we'll exit, etc. It was a problem we wanted to solve. A problem we have faced and seen in very near, I would say, to our lives or people around us. So that's how I think that plunge happened. And to answer, I think, Sauvik's question as well, I think it was not about whether people are doing anything about it in the country or how mature it was already at that point in time, but about it is a problem. It needs to be solved. If we do it in the right way, probably we can do it in a way where it can last for long. So I think that's how the thought process went.
Great. So I have a question around this. And if you had a time machine and you could go back, what advice would you give to a smart driven individual about the real world and what advice to ignore? Like if you met your 20-year-old younger version, what would you say?
I think, I think one advice, I don't know, so somehow I think there were a few incidents because of which I got shaped up, like I was telling, right? So some of these things became clearer to me. So I think, and I also posted this on LinkedIn some time back because someone asked me this question, like, is there some advice you would give to our students who are probably like into the first year? So see, one thing I tell them, or I would also tell myself at that point in time is, it's okay to be confused, right? I think being clear about your long-term goals, I think that's very overrated. Finding your passion, I think these are statements that are very overrated. Somehow it's okay to be confused. I think what we need to do is, we need to be very clear about certain fundamentals that will help us take a certain decision. Right? We should not feel like, oh yeah, this guy is so sorted, and we all feel that way. Even I would have felt it by looking at some people who at least appear very sorted in life. So for me also, I would give the same advice to not feel confused. It's okay, I would say, go with the flow, but try to have some fundamentals. Right? To me, those fundamentals were very simple. The first fundamental to me was, uh, I think the first thing would be like live life 2 years at a time. Right? So that was the first fundamental to me. So I did not want to plan, and very typically how people ask, right, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, what will you do? I would ask those questions to myself, but I would live life only with 2 years at a time. Like that is what I do personally. I don't know whether it is right or not, but that is one fundamental I always stay very close to. Second, I stay very close to is I never want to get into a very lavish lifestyle, and that was one reason why I left McKinsey also very soon. When I was asked why are you leaving McKinsey so early, I told them like I don't want to get used to staying in Taj and ITC or traveling in business class. So let's say the jet was there at that point in time. I once you get used to that, it's very difficult to go back. Once you have EMIs, once you have a certain style of living, it's very difficult to go back and rediscover and I would say reinvent that whole thing. So that is the second thing I always live by. Even right now, if you look at, I somehow do interviews where people tell that I have lakhs of EMIs per month to pay. So I at least need this much of, I would say, a job offer. See, what that does is it tries to pull you down in terms of taking risks or taking some part of your life to figure out things. So that is, I would say, the second thing which that I would say look at as a fundamental process to guide me along the journey. And the third most important also is enjoy the journey, right? Like I told, I live 2 years at a, I would say for me, life is about living 2 years at a time. I try to enjoy the journey, right? Like very similar to, we have started this company. It's not like we are thinking how the exit will happen, what wealth creation will happen for us, etc., etc. See, those are important milestones. But then, are we enjoying the journey? Or are we just fretting over what probably is way too forward and not living the present? So that is very important, I think. So these are some fundamentals that I try to govern, and this is what I would probably tell myself. Maybe I think this has come to me, I would say, the past few years of trying to discover myself, my own strengths, and how I want to live probably and retire probably, and then go back to doing something very different. But this is how these things have shaped. So this is how I would go back to my younger self and tell.
And thank you for sharing this. I remember I'd asked you this thing when the first time we met in IIT Kharagpur, and I asked you, Puneet, just out of curiosity, why did you leave McKinsey? So you told me I was in my comfort zone, and I was like, "Kya banda hai yaar, Taj us sab mein travel." And he told, "No, Aditya, these really spoil you." And I really appreciate that you are sharing these things because we are in such a materialistic driven society where the definition of success is based upon the brand, the number of air miles you have, the latest vehicle you have, matlab the definition. And it really creates a lot of mental, what should I say, pressure on us. So thank you for really sharing this because many people should know about this. Like you told that Aditya having a gold medal, I wasn't able to clear. And it takes a lot of courage to share all these things on a public forum. I really would like to thank you, Puneet, because it really is inspiring the people who are watching this and would be listening the recording session. Uh, Even Shavik has mentioned, sir, taking notes of some great wisdom from you, sir.
I think, but I think just one caveat I would add, Souvik, on top of it, and for even anyone else. See, these are very personal choices, right? So, see, right now, if you see, there are 10 people who might come and say this is not the right way. I'm not telling the right ways. I'm telling the way I have approached life, on how I am approaching problems and events and incidents. So, create your right. Take something if you think that aligns. Otherwise, I think it's fine. Just look at it as a story of someone else which doesn't fit to you. It's okay.
So Shavik has asked another question. So for an entrepreneur, learning is an ongoing journey. How do you decide on what you have to learn next? And can we know about your upcoming ideas? You shared with me, but for the forum, Puneet, I'll invite you.
So, how to decide on what you want to learn next? See, I think I don't know a lot of things. So, if I tell you, see, being an entrepreneur doesn't mean, I think, know it all kinds, right? I don't think know it all is the right kind of entrepreneur. Maybe, see, Elon Musk might be an exception, and maybe when you talk to him, he also might give some answers which he doesn't know or things he wants to learn more. But see, if you ask me, I don't think I am anywhere closer to knowing a lot of things. So to me, learning is anything and everything, right? Any problem that comes which I need to, I think, and that is one thing which attracts me to working at YourDOST because it's a very new sector. No one has told us exactly what and how this would go forward or how this would mature later. So that is a discovery. That is what takes learning. And I think in terms of ideas, per se, I think right now the focus is YourDOST itself, and I think how the last 1.5 year has shaped. Definitely, I think the curve of mental health awareness has spread a lot more faster than how it has happened. Maybe if I look at the journey of roughly now 5.5, 6 years that we have had with YourDOST, I think what has happened in the last 1.5 years is a lot more than what maturity or awareness came in 4 years before that. So I think that has resulted in us working a lot more harder, see, because see what we are doing has become a lot more relevant. So how do you reach the right set of people? How do you make sure that you're still trying to do what you want to do, but do it in a faster way as well? So I think for me, I think there are no separate ideas per se, but it's more about how do we scale this to new heights and try and impact as many lives as we can.
So, Puneet, my next question to you is, with so much competition around and also the stigma attached, like I'll share a very personal experience. I won't take the name of the person. I was speaking to a very senior person. Like, the reason we bond is because we both are very vulnerable in sharing our thoughts. Like, I stepped out of corporate after my life changing transplant surgery. So someone called me today over LinkedIn and told that, Aditya, I really admire your journey. And when I asked him, okay, what's going on, he told that, I have a kidney failure, I'm suffering from blood cancer, and I also have a separation case which is really harassing me, and I've joined back the corporate. So my first question was, are you taking any therapy or counseling session? And he told, Aditya, previously I was taking, but one session is costing me around 2,500 rupees in a very renowned hospital. And now I'm not in a space. And when I told him, why you not starting out? He told, Aditya, I do not know what to do. So this idea, because I know I have been associated, I know how affordable are you making mental health services in India, but still not many people are aware, not many people are vocal about. Like, people would put their selfies in a gym, people would put their vacation selfie, but no one would put their counselor selfie, hey, I'm having a one-on-one session. So according to you, what is holding people back? What is the exact stigma? Because, like, I'm quite happy that I have seen you and the entire team, the way the transformations are happening. Like, I still remember your recent campaign, ये हम हैं, ये हमारे टेस्टिमोनियल है और ये हमारी पारी हो रही है. मतलब the way you share na, that if someone sees the t-shirt or the goodie bag and people walk up to you and say that I'm really thankful for your team. So what exactly is holding people back? Because there is so much awareness and so much market, and despite knowing this unique opportunity, people are still not coming forward. What's your thought?
So I think, see, it's not easy as well, right? See, I would not be fair if I assume that just because we are working towards it, everyone should start using it, right? I don't think that should be the right assumption or expectation I should even have, or we should even have, right? Uh, See, there are certain thoughts which someone else might be more, I think, mature with, we may not be, and vice versa. So, so what I would say is, see, we have been brought up in a certain way around listening to certain things, right? As simple as, let's say, mental ho gaya hai, has always been a slang, right? Mental health, for example, which derives half of the word from that, then it starts, I think your brain starts somewhere powering that same thought, right? So there are a lot of, I think the stigma is because there's a certain way that you are brought up by with people around, and there's a certain generation that you have lived with who had certain thoughts, and hence those got reinforced or got absorbed by you as well. The way you saw certain movies depicting this, the way you saw certain people speaking. How many of us saw any of our parents, even like we have seen a lot of our parents or a lot of, I would say, our relatives have had not the best of marriages. How many people have taken divorce, right? As a culture, do we even look at that as not having, that's also stigma, right? Now, should people go and start maybe separating if they are not living happily? Some will say yes, some will say no, right? Now that's also, we can call it that as well stigma, right? But see, all these things cannot change overnight. So if you ask me, why are people not seeking, or let's say not open to speaking about it? I think it will take some generations or maybe a few years and decades to change that into becoming very normal, like gym, for example, right? So that, I think, process is something which requires that patience and perseverance, and that is what we are mentally prepared for. Like as a company, as an individual, when we jumped into this, we did not. Like, we were sure like it will not be like in 2 years, 3 years, people will like everyone will start using and getting to mental health, right? And that is exactly the thought we have right now as well. And like I think the thing that you shared as well, right? I think a lot more people are now open to speaking. So we are seeing that change even in the last 5 to 6 years of how it was, let's say maybe 5 years back. See, when we started this company, probably there was hardly anyone speaking. And then 1 year, 2 years into it is when Deepika Padukone opened up. And because Deepika Padukone opened up, people started thinking, oh, even a celebrity like that can have an episode of depression, and she's so vocal about it, right? And then a lot of celebrities started speaking up. So things became a little more normalized. Dear Zindagi came, which tried normalizing. See, as a country, we try to live and learn from things like cricket, Bollywood, celebrities, people we look up to, parents, right? See, unless all these things also start maturing, you can't expect an individual to change over time. And if you ask me, I have seen this visible change in people, probably of the coming generation, how they are open about the whole concept of mental health, how they are open to speaking about, let's say, the things that they are going through, how they are so open about the whole concept of counseling, going to a counselor. So I myself have seen that change. So I think that's a very positive thing. And I don't think I had expected this to have been faster than that. I expected this is how our culture has been. We have been brought up like, see, 30 years before I started this, let's say, maybe I also did not know much and I have never seen around me anyone going for counseling, or maybe if going, I did not know about it. Now, I can't expect within those 5 years that 30-year thing will change, 30-year old, uh, let's say, things will change as well. So that is how it is a journey. It is a process we all will take, and that is what is happening much faster.
Thank you for addressing that. Now, Puneet, my next question, which is a common question, is like we all have personally, professionally, and socially transformed over the last 1 year. So my question to you is, because you are an entrepreneur, you are a husband, you are a team leader, you are a business owner, you are a son, you are a son-in-law. So in the last few months, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved you as a person?
Mhm. So I think, yeah. So I think I don't know what the habit or the behavior per se, but let's say the belief and little bit of that belief has caused a change in behavior, especially in the last few months, or I would say the whole pandemic time has brought in me is uh, broadly in terms of, see, not fretting about things which are not under our control, right? See, like as an example, pandemic itself, right? So there are so many things you can't control, right? Now, if I just, I think, keep looking at how the number of cases are increasing on a daily basis and just start getting worried about that, but I can't do anything about it, right? Now, so that I think for me is a new belief or a behavior, right? Try to look at what is under my control. Try and start doing things which are under my control rather than looking at things which are not under my control and using that to affect me and my behavior as well. So I think that is one thing I think which has helped me also in the last 1.5 year of how I think uncertain the external situations have been and how everything is shaping up. And right now, again, if you look at things like how the cases are increasing, see, one way is I can always look at that, feel very sad about it, and then maybe just lose all the motivation to work hard. The other way is look at it, okay, it's not under my control. What I can control is maybe try and take all the precautions. But along with that, try and see what is it, like for me, what we do as YourDOST has becomes a lot more relevant during these times because a lot of people go through anxiety, a lot of people go through very difficult times from jobs, financial, a lot of other things. Can I work harder during this time to support that and keep myself busy to not give time to myself to unnecessarily think of things which are not in my control? So I think that is one change or one thing in the last few months which have been reinforced and has been very helpful for me.
Great, great, Puneet. Thank you for addressing that. So, Puneet, we'll take a short 30 seconds break and we'll meet on the other side. So, I'll
Sure.
just run this small break.
Sure.
And we are back. So, Puneet, Shavik, our most eager viewer, has another question for you, which I just highlighted. So, here is Shavik question on screen. Hmm, Just a minute, I'll again highlight it. So, Shavik is curious, and it just came to me right now that YourDOST started out as documenting blog about interviewing with people with mental concern. Why didn't you choose YouTube to reach out to a bigger audience?
So I think see two parts to that question. One, I think this was 2010. I think that time YouTube was kind of nowhere close to where it is today in terms of vlogging, interviews, videos, etc. as well, right? So that was one reason. Second is we did not interview people who were suffering from mental illness. I think see if you look at where we are today, 10 years back from that, I think stigma was a lot more. It was very difficult if we were to go and find people who had gone through, let's say, a difficult time or a mental illness. What we did was we met counselors or psychologists who have been dealing with, let's say, mental health related issues and providing counseling. So we asked them what are the kind of cases that come to them, how do they deal, and then try to bring it out in a very anonymized fashion, like remove all the jargons, remove all the personal details, and then try to put it out. So that is, I think, what, and for that blog, or I would say writing or text became, I would say, the medium we chose as, I would say, because it was not a person speaking about it. It was us who were kind of narrating it more as a third person and then giving some guidance to people.
And I really appreciate the fact, Puneet, that the entire team really normalizes overcoming mental health issues through the blogs. Like when team members are vocal about the cause, it really puts the company vision aligned with each and every expectation. So, Puneet, just out of context, suppose tomorrow if someone wants to join the team of YourDOST, what is the criteria?
I think, see, there's no one criteria. If I were to say, different roles, different seniority have a very different. But if you ask me personally how I take interviews, yes, I think, see, to me, will is more important than the skill. Right? I don't judge a person generally by the skill unless it is a very specialist that we are trying to take for a very senior position, and they should know probably a lot more than what we know or can learn over the job. But especially people who are either freshers or within 0 to 2 years experience, and I think we have a lot of those. Because somewhere what I have observed is I think unlearning is a lot more difficult than learning. So it's easier to shape people, I would say, and take them in a journey. And I would say have them more motivated. So I think that is how we try to look at more intrinsics than skill set tests and things. So, so I think no one answer to this question per se.
Okay. Thank you, Puneet. So, Puneet, my next question is like, and this is one question which I ask to all our speakers. What do you do when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused? I know you have a chief happiness officer, in-house chief happiness officer.
At home
Tell
and
us about your
offices.
24/7 chief happiness officer at home. Tell us about your chief happiness officer and what is your personal mantra to stay focused?
Right. So I think chief happiness officer, which Aditya is saying, I think for some who do not know about her, I think she's a small dog. Small, I would say, yeah, still I would say small for us. She's been there with us for the last 5.5 years. Her name is Penny. We had adopted her 5.5 years back, I think from right outside our office. And from there, I think she has been with us, acting as a chief happiness officer, helping us, I would say, get rid of stress ourselves and distract us from, I think, the whole thing that happens when we are working hard, right? So, and I think the day before yesterday, or maybe 2 or 3 days back itself, we had just posted her story as well on Facebook. So for those who want to know how we adopted her, what goes behind that, and how she is, with a lot of photos of her, it's also there on the Facebook page as well. I think answering the second part of the question which Aditya has asked, in terms of what I do when I feel overwhelmed, see for me, I think for me, it's very clear, right? When I feel overwhelmed or unfocused, I take time out. So for me, that is very important. And depending on how, I think the severity of that overwhelming, or if that's happening very regularly, I think that decides how longer that timeout should be. So it could even be a very simple, small, a few hours, or let's say second part of the day as a timeout, and then engaging myself with, let's say, the puppies who are there around the office, so I go and pet them as well, or probably watching stand-up comedy. So these are some go-to places for me to distract myself, and I would say try to get that focus back. Or if it is, let's say, if something like this is happening very regularly for me over a period of few weeks, I generally try to take 2-3 days off, and at times I even go and take probably uh, a room or a Airbnb here in Bangalore and just stay outside the house without talking to people and just focusing and reading some things and engaging in things that are more important to me. So I think that to me is very important to me. That is a very uh, I think natural thing that I have adopted now, to take a time out, even to get away from everything, and let's say 2 days to stay, let's say in an Airbnb or let's say room nearby, all alone, engaging in things that are under my control.
That is really something interesting. Like, I would also encourage everyone. That's great. So, Puneet, one follow up question around this. What have you become better at saying no to?
Mhm. So, no, no. Mhm. But I think no, tricky question, and not something that comes directly to mind in terms of saying no. I think I think no one answer per se. Maybe if there is an option to pass, I would like to pass. But see, otherwise, if you ask me, like I generally like try to be very clear in terms of if I'm saying a no, being very assertive. Like, see, as experts, we actually have a program around assertiveness that we do for people, right? So I think I have gone through that myself as well to try and see how I can do that much more easier, because see, a lot of times there are ideas that come to you, there are things that you probably cannot all take at a time, but I think you have to kind of say no to those and do it in a certain way. So I think maybe that has a very limited answer to this.
Great, great, great. Okay. And Puneet, just the last question for the day is we have got a question from LinkedIn. What do you believe it is important for anyone to be aware of if they do not know that someone close to them is having some mental health issues or challenges? What would you say are the most basic markers? Because, like, I'll give you an idea behind it. I find a lot of entrepreneurs who come to me, and the first thing they say, Aditya, we are feeling depressed. I'm shocked because I ask them, are you taking any antidepressant? They are like, no. Are you
Hmm.
sure you are depressed or you are feeling low? Because there is a very
Right.
fine line and
Right.
our vocabulary is limited. So, what would you
Correct.
say?
Correct. Yeah, I think that is the other extreme we need to prevent as well, right? Like I told you, we are seeing a generational change in terms of the acceptance of mental health and that normalization. But we should not take that normalization to the other level, like you said, Aditya. Like, so using terms like depression and feeling depressed, or oh, I want to keep this in a certain place. I am an OCD. See, all these are clinical disorders, right? You should not be using these in very loose language. See, what that does is it defeats the purpose to another extreme itself. Like, see, somewhere we are trivializing certain terms and trying to, I would say, equate disorders to feelings, right? So, which is a very bad thing. That is, I think, one part we should all try to, I think, prevent, if at all we have to support mental health to become normalized in the right way. To answer Kunal's question in terms of, let's say, how can we help people around us? I think very basic 2 or 3 things which are very important. I think one is identification. And before that identification, that awareness is very important, right? So we should know in certain signs someone is going through a challenge, right? So, and we may not call it a mental health issue, right? Mental health issue, let's just call it probably as someone is going through emotional turmoil or whatever we may want to call it. We should know certain, I would say, signs that probably we can use for identifying. Right? That is one thing we should kind of build that knowledge. And there are enough open forums, like we ourselves have created a very open training, which is a series of videos which helps you do this. Second thing we should do is, now that we identified probably someone, let's say a college classmate, batchmate is going through a difficult time. Now, after we identify their skill that we should have, right? So there are certain elements of those counseling skills which are important, which are about how do we speak, what we should and what we should not speak. There is something called active listening, right? And since this is not the right forum to get into, I would say, details for these, so those basic counseling skills are very important for us to have that listening and the talking going in balance to be able to interact with that person. The third skill that we should try and get is how do I refer this person, right? And that is something which doesn't come naturally to a lot of us, right? Because if at all we have to tell someone in terms of, let's say, if he's going through a difficult phase and we have to ask them to take professional help because we have identified it is very difficult. See, either we tell them in a way that they feel offended about it, or in our mind we think if we tell them, they'll feel offended about it. Right? Now that is a skill we should also know, and there are certain ways in which you can actually take them through this process and then guide them towards, let's say, taking up a professional help if it is required. And not everyone who is in that first, when you have identified, needs to go to that third phase. Right? So these three are, I would say, skill sets we all should have, and that is the role we can all play in terms of being layman counselors. Right? And when I say layman counselor, it doesn't mean that now we should just tell them, and that is one other problem with counseling, right? We all think we can counsel others, but we should try to distinguish, like, where do we limit that? Right? But how can we still become, like, see how we know? So, and the training is also named in such a way, it's called psychological or emotional first aid, because it's very similar to how we all know about physical first aid, right? Like, let's say someone maybe near to us has a cut and or a bruise, and we know how to clean it with Dettol, apply band-aid or clean it up and then cover the wound. Very similar to that, we should know that basic skill. Right? And how we know that we can draw a line between that wound versus, let's say, something that requires a stitch or a surgery. Exactly the same way, we should look at emotional first aid as well. Right? We know where to draw a line, and we should know how to take them, let's say, to a professional for that next step of intervention. So this is how, this is what I would tell Kunal, and even everyone should go through this, despite whether they want to become professionals in this domain or not. This is basic that we should all have as skill set.
So, Puneet, where can people come across this psychological first aid training or emotional first aid training? Can you guide people? Is there a resource on our own platform, YourDOST?
Right. So it is a resource on YourDOST, but it's not an open resource for everyone. Like right now, what we do is we provide this for all the corporates, colleges that we work with. Right. So it's basically limited to them. But I think in case there are people who want to look at that, and I'm assuming if we want, we can share my email ID as well. So if you want, you can write to me and I can share those more for people to learn as well.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, on screen you are seeing Puneet's email ID and Puneet's LinkedIn. Please do not spam him. Okay. Okay. So, Puneet, just one last question, because Shavik has asked a very innocent question, and I feel it is important that we answer. But before we, I read out Shavik's question, I would like to ask you, what's your definition of success? Because if you will see Shavik's question, it's a very innocent, naive question. Okay, so first, just share what is your definition of success and how would you guide Shavik? Because this is a common question which is asked on almost every forum. You are also aware about it.
So I think both answers. I think for me, I'll answer in a similar way to both what Shavik has asked and like defining success as well. So I think, like I also told, I think one of the other answers is, see, for me, it's a journey is very important, right? See, success, I would say it's not a goalpost. So for me, that goalpost has not. See, goalposts help you, right? But then how do you reach that goalpost if unless you enjoy that journey? That goalpost will hold no value, right? See, I think, and this is something how I would define success or happiness as well, right? To me, happiness, success, it's a journey. It's not about one particular number, milestone. Like for me, I won't say, like, I think Skovik has said, when did you know that you have become successful? I don't think, and I come to know about, I have become successful only when I enter into these kind of, let's say, speaker events where someone says a successful person, etc. I don't think success has a definition. It's all relative. And that's why I always tell it's a journey that you take. You need to feel content about it, right? It's not being successful, it's being content about how and what you have done or what you are doing. And interestingly, like one of our, I would say, mentors come investors, Angel, who had invested in YourDOST at a very early stage, he always used to tell us this thing, right? This is the PR that you receive. And when I say PR, I say the media attention and the headlines, and let's say when you get into these events, let that not kind of make you overconfident. Let that be for external folks. Let that not deviate you as a person. And that is very interesting, right? I always used to think why we should feel happy about, like, for example, when we were awarded Forbes 30 under 30, I felt very happy. right? But then when I realized, yeah, it is good, it is a certain milestone, but was that success? I don't think so. Right? So I think that is how I would define, I would say, happiness or success. It is enjoying the journey and being content about that journey rather than one particular milestone or achievement. So, so that is at least my life mantra plus the way I try to live and take it as well, one day, 2 years at a time.
That's really powerful. And I wanted you to address this because a lot of people get into this cycle or hamster wheel of vanity metrics. I've got so many followers, I've got this and that. And it's important to put it out there that it's part of the journey. These are not validation, it's basically an output to the effort. Great.
Follow. But I think just to add, Aditya, maybe a very simple thing I want to add to that is, see, it's so that doesn't mean you should not enjoy those milestones. Right? You should celebrate them, right? And that's why I'm saying, see, success, we should get to micro successes or micro milestones that we should enjoy. See, when I say journey doesn't mean like every day celebrating, but those smaller things in life, that is what we should celebrate. Let's say that one campaign which was successful or that one event which was good. We should celebrate those rather than saying whether, okay, I'll celebrate only after I have 1 million followers. It is good, but should I not celebrate after the first 1,000 or the first 5,000? I should. Right? So that is, I think, how we should, I think, celebrate those rather than waiting for a one fine day to celebrate all of this together.
Great. So, Puneet, what's your message for the viewers and for the upcoming speaker? How was your experience today? This is the last question for our show for the day.
I think the experience has always been very good, Aditya, with you. I think, and I told this to you earlier, I think once when I was pinging you as well, right? Like one thing I think I always get inspired by your journey. I think very personally in terms of how, I think the phase that you had seen in terms of physical health and the amount of, I would say, conviction and perseverance you have shown in terms of, I don't know, number of medals to number of marathons to, I think, the disciplines. I think to me, that is something I envy. Like, I'll be very honest with you, and I have started doing that small thing after watching, I think, somebody else give this guidance or advice as well as to, I would say, maintain a small Excel sheet to look at what I'm doing on a daily basis on that thing, right? And something which you had also told this to me long back, and so this has been a very informal interaction. It was not like a formal interaction to me. It was all about, okay, let's just share experiences and see if someone, I would say, gets, I would just benefited out of it. And it has been a pleasure, Aditya. And as always, you have always been an inspiration.
Likewise, Puneet, and I look forward to meeting you in person in coming years ahead.
Definitely, same here, Aditya.
Thank you, Puneet, for taking out time and inspiring the. Another thing for the viewers, please, every day Puneet shares and they are directly from heart. This is where Puneet shares those LinkedIn profile, and also don't forget to visit www